Like in Israel.
In Israel, the official pronunciation is...
But back in the biblical days.
Probably neither. Probably a variation of there's some evidence that Ashkenazic pronunciation to make up. We did the second Mishnah last week. We only did part of it. We didn't complete it, so that's what I want to do today, and also give a little bit of a summary of some of the things that we discussed last week. Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rabbi HaNasi, said, Rabbi Gamliel, as I mentioned last week, was the son, but not only the son, but he succeeded his father as the Nasi, as the leader. Rabbi Gamliel's father, Rabbi HaNasi, the compiler and editor of the Mishnah, when he passed away, before he passed away, he gave an oral will that his two sons should succeed him. Rabbi Shimon should succeed him as the leading scholar, the head of the court, the head of the Sanhedrin, and Rabbi Gamliel should be the leader, the actual leader of the Jewish people who lived in Israel at that time. And Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rabbi HaNasi, says the following: excellent is the study of the Torah when combined with a worldly occupation. I mentioned last week that the translation of excellent is not exactly the greatest translation. In this book over here, my translation, it is good to combine the study of Torah with an occupation. It's also not a perfect translation. I would translate the word yafa means beautiful. It's more appealing, more beautiful, more aesthetic when you combine Torah with Derech Eretz, which is translated here as worldly occupation. Here they translate it as just occupation. That's one of the very many translations of the word Derech Eretz, of the two words Derech Eretz, and we discussed some of them last week. I'll just repeat them briefly. But before I go into it, most understand it to mean occupation. Yes, a worldly occupation. That's the most perfect balance. The person who just works without Torah, missing the purpose in life. The person who has Torah without occupation is going to become destitute and won't be able to survive. So you need both. Rabbi Gamliel is here to show us some balance. His father, Rabbi HaNasi, spoke about balance also. He spoke about beauty, everything you do. What happened over here? Which is the right path that a person should choose for himself? And the answer is that which is tiferes, that is beautiful for yourself, and brings beauty and elicits beauty from others. He's talking about, in terms of our traits, our character traits, to combine an internal beauty with an external beauty. It's interesting that we're right now in the period of Sefirat, where we count the days, and each day stands for a specific characteristic. Right now we're in the week of Tiferes, of beauty, and today happens to be Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes, beauty within beauty, that combination, external and internal beauty. And that was the balance that Rabbi HaNasi spoke about. His son, Rabbi Gamliel, is the next generation, a generation that experienced major changes in terms of the geopolitical situation in Israel. The Roman Empire is beginning to fall apart. Things were becoming much more difficult for the Jews. Rabbi HaNasi lived in a time when the Romans were had a good relationship with Israel, because Rabbi HaNasi was very close to the emperor, the Caesar, and he was able to gather thousands of rabbis, of scholars, to put together the Mishnah. With his passing and the change in the Roman leadership, things were becoming much more difficult, and here the focus is much more down to earth, but also balanced. The focus is, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you're going to see this perhaps in almost every Mishnah, that the rabbi whose quote we're learning will seem to be attempting to develop a system of balance. And balance is and whenever you're dealing with balance, you have to realize that it's not always 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30, it's 80-20, it's 60-40, and you have to know where you put the emphasis. Where's the 60 and where's the 40? So Rabbi Gamliel is telling us that it's nice to combine Torah with Derech Eretz, with the, let's say, occupation. That the balance should be mostly in the area of Torah and secondarily in the area of occupation. And the reason why this balance is so important, so he continues to say, because toil in both of them keeps sin out of one's mind. Simply it means when you're preoccupied, no matter what you're preoccupied with, but preoccupation with something positive and constructive keeps you away from sin. You don't have time, you don't have the leisure, the luxury to sin. Sinning requires wasted time. If you don't have what to do with your life, it's very easy for you to find things to fill in that void which are not wholesome, to put it mildly. So that's one interpretation, that in being involved in worldly occupation, which requires, especially in those days. Today you don't have to work physically hard to earn a living. You can earn a living just by sitting at a desk. But being preoccupied is the main point, that your mind is not allowed to wander into areas that are not wholesome. There's a biblical verse in the book of Job that says, Adam la'amal yulad. A person is born to toil. And the Talmud says there are three kinds of toil. There's physical toil, amal malacha, the toil that is involved in work. There's amal sicha, the toil involved in speech. And amal Torah, the toil involved in the study of Torah. And the ultimate toil is the study of Torah. But we need the others as well. You need the toil in work. The reason for that, the simple reason why there's toil, why toil in work is a positive thing, as I said before, it's because you're preoccupied. Also, physical work has the capacity to refine a person. It gives a person, when a person is physically involved in doing something positive, that brings about refinement of the person. But there's also a deeper understanding. The Rebbe once explained, when God created this world, God is the one who gives us everything, and we are on the receiving end. But God says that's not good. It's not good to always be on the receiving end. I want you, human beings, to be my partners in creation. I want you to be givers, not just recipients, not just sitting back and welcoming all the good and all the blessings. That's wonderful that we have all these blessings, but there's an expression in the Talmud where it refers to a beggar whose bread is called nahama dechasufa, Aramaic for shameful bread. It's embarrassing for a person to always be on the receiving end and not being able to give. So God says, I want to give you the greatest gift. The greatest gift I could give you is that you shouldn't just be recipients, you should be givers and donors as well. That's why I'm giving you the opportunity that the world doesn't just provide everything for you without you doing anything. You have to work for it, you have to contribute. And that way you're my partner in creation. That's one of the reasons we have Shabbos. Shabbos is an acknowledgement that the 6 days of the week we are partners with God. Well, there's a little danger in that. The danger is if you think you're God's partner, you may decide that you're the senior partner. and that God is barely the junior partner, or maybe even forget about God being a partner. So there's one day of a week, the Shabbos, where you come to realizing, no, God is really the creator. We're really on the receiving end. God is really the one who controls everything, so we don't let it get to our head. So the 6 days of the week we work, we're partners with God. Come Shabbos, and we recognize that God is really in total control. So the reason why we need work is not just because we're preoccupied and we don't have time and the energy to sin. Not only does it have a refining effect, but more importantly, it's edifying. It gives us the status of givers, donors, and partners with God. But that's not enough. It's not enough to work. You have to have the toil of speech. Now, the toil of speech could be a few things. On one level, it means prayer. Prayer is well, we express our desires and our needs, that we're dependent on God. The person has to always have that recognition that, yes, I'm working for a living. I have a job. I'm doing well. I'm making good money. I'm prosperous. That's all great and wonderful. But it's ultimately God who's in control of everything, and He's the one who gives me whatever I have. So yes, I'm a partner with God, but God gave me that partnership role, and God is the one who's ultimately responsible, and therefore I ask God for all my needs. But that's still not enough. You need the toil of Torah, because Torah is what gives us a sense of what my purpose is in this world. Torah has many other aspects to it as well, but at the very least, it guides us and tells us why we're here and what is our purpose. Now, it also mentioned that it causes sin to be forgotten. Why doesn't it just say if a person has he's preoccupied with earning a living, that he won't come to do a sin, which is an expression used before. In the first Mishnah, Rabbi HaNasi says, you shall reflect on three things. Reflect upon three things, and you will not come to sin. That's Rabbi HaNasi. His son, Rabbi Gamliel, doesn't use the word "you will not come to sin," but then he says, "For the effort required by them both keeps sin out of mind," or literally translated, it causes you to forget sin. So what does that mean? So again, on a simple level, it means that if you're so preoccupied with doing good things, both the study of Torah and work, you're not going to have time to sin. You're not going to be able to consider sinning. We find an analogy to this in the Midrash. It refers to the holiday of Sukkot, of Sukkos, as the first day where sins start to count. Yom Kippur, we get rid of all of our sins. 4 days later, we're ready to start anew, to start sinning all over again. What about the 4 days in between? Why are they not considered days that we're able to sin? Yom Kippur is over. Why don't we talk about those 4 days? So the simple explanation is that during those 4 days, we're so busy preparing for the holiday, building our sukkah, purchasing the etrog, the lulav, and getting ready for the holiday. Who has time to sin? That's the simple understanding of that, and that's the simple understanding also when a person is preoccupied, has a mind that's preoccupied with Torah study, hands, arms that are involved with schlepping. We know some schleppers here. When you're doing that, you don't have the time and the energy to commit sins. Did you ever think of robbing a bank while you're schlepping? No, you're too busy schlepping.
That makes sense.
And dollars as well.
Bank robbery, you're thinking about it no matter what you're doing.
No bank robbery.
No, we don't approve of that.
No bank robbery.
But there's a deeper meaning, and I touched on this last week. Forgetfulness, that's the expression used here. You forget sin. What is forgetfulness? Why do people forget things? There might be some physiological reasons for it. I can't remember what they are. But why do people forget? Because they lack interest in something. They're desensitized to it. If you're desensitized to something, you won't remember. Maybe that's why I always forget to bring the iPad. I have to go back home to get it. I must have some type of mental block with iPads, with technology. But people forget things because they're desensitized to it. In the Tanya, the classic work of Chassidus, it talks about the animal soul desensitizes us. There's an animal in us that doesn't have sensitivity. An animal, I'm not trying to malign animals. But then that's the natural status of an animal. An animal will walk down the street and step on anything. Doesn't make a difference if it's dirt or if it's $100 bill or perhaps even, God forbid, a little child. The animal, most animals, will just walk and not realize what it's stepping on. It's because that's what an animal is. That's natural. That's the way an animal is supposed to be. Of course, you could train animals, but the animal in its natural state is that way. When a person forgets things, that's because their animal soul desensitizes them. But there's also a positive form of desensitization, that your godly soul desensitizes you to materialistic things. There are some people who are in a very high spiritual level who don't have the interest in doing things that are not edifying, that are not spiritual. Why? Because they're desensitized to it. They forget. There are some people who could forget to eat. I wish I had that problem. But some people are desensitized to it. They forget to eat breakfast. They forget to eat lunch because they're desensitized to it. It doesn't speak to them. So when when it says here that you forget sin, that means you become desensitized to the materialistic aspects of life that lead you to sin. It doesn't mean that you can't sin, it just means that you're desensitized to it, and the likelihood is much less that you'll sin. In the negative sense, we're told that Golus, exile, when we were exiled from the temple, it wasn't just a geographic exile, it was also a spiritual and psychological exile. We became capable of becoming desensitized to spirituality. Unfortunately, most people today are not naturally spiritual. We have to work on it. And the way to work on it, to become desensitized to the wrong things, is through study of Torah and being physically involved in doing things that are positive. One of the analogies for exile is like inhaling poisonous fumes. God forbid a person is in a fire. The most dangerous part of the fire is not the flame itself, but the fumes. Because before the flame can even reach a person, the fumes could already kill you, could put you to sleep, and then you won't be able to breathe, and God forbid, that could be the end. Well, that's what Golus is. Golus is the Hebrew word for exile. Exile is a state where we're breathing fumes, and that desensitizes us. We fall asleep. Usually, if there's a threat to your life, and you see it, you'll do something to react to it. You'll run away, you'll get a weapon, you'll do something to fight and resist the threat to your life. But if the threat to your life puts you to sleep, you can't defend yourself against it. And that's what Golus is, and it deprives you of oxygen. What is the real oxygen that we need? That's Torah. Torah is the oxygen that gives us the strength to be able to keep the fumes out of our system. Because if you are subjected to these fumes, it takes away your oxygen, and it also takes away your power of smell. That's what COVID is. What is COVID? COVID is a physical illness that we are all subjected to. We all experienced, some people more and some people less, but everyone got something from it, one of the casualties of COVID was the loss of smell. I think that's a metaphor, that in exile, we're lacking the sensitivity. Smell it makes you sensitive to make you aware. How do animals hunt? An animal senses the smell of food miles away. The animal has that very acute sense of smell. Our godly soul has that acute sense of smell as well. That's why it says Mashiach. Well, how are we going to identify Mashiach? One of the ways is that he's going to smell righteousness. What that means, it doesn't mean he's going to go around sniffing people. It means that his sensitivity to what's right and what's wrong is so acute that he could pick it up. He could pick it up miles away, and he can tell people and judge people because he can sense everything with his acute power of smell, because Mashiach is the antithesis of exile. So when we suffer from that kind of forgetfulness, how do we counter it? By doing the opposite, aiding ourselves, arming ourselves with a opposite sense of desensitization, by becoming sensitive to spirituality through Torah and through Derech Eretz, which we just explained means work. But Derech Eretz, we also said, has many other meanings as well. A list of the different meanings is, number one, it means work, occupation, work. Another meaning is ethics. What it's saying is that you can't just study Torah, you also have to develop your ethics. A person could think, I'm studying Torah all day long, I'm studying all the laws of the Torah, I know them backwards and forwards, and you could still be a very gross person. You could still be a very unhealthy, spiritually unhealthy person, because you can take your unhealthiness and have that taint your Torah study. No, if you are, to use an analogy, there was once two Hasidim were arguing, as Jews often do, and one of them said, I pray very quickly. Why? He says, because imagine you're going on a wagon. In those days they had horse and wagon, and there are a bunch of hooligans that are throwing rocks at you. What do? You make the wagon go faster. You hit the horses and you say, let's go fast, so you don't get any of the stones thrown at you. Same thing when you pray, your mind has all sorts of negative thoughts that enter your mind that distract you from your prayer. So you have to pray quickly. So the other chassid said, yeah, that's a good analogy, but it only works if the hooligans are outside the wagon and throwing rocks at you from the outside of the wagon. But if they jump on the wagon with you, you're taking them along with you. You're not going to be, what you have to do is roll up your sleeves and push them off the wagon. That's why the prayer has to take longer, to really muster the energy to get rid of the hooligans, the negative thoughts and negative inspiration. Same thing over here. You could study Torah in order to refine yourself, but you can take the unrefined attitudes with you in your study of Torah. That your study of Torah is done in a way for self-aggrandizement, to make yourself look better, that you're smarter than someone else, you're a greater scholar. Some people like to show off their knowledge, so they study Torah to show off their knowledge. So what you're doing is taking the unrefined attitudes that you have in your Torah study, with your Torah study. So in addition to Torah study, you have to work separately on refining your character. So that's the second translation of Derech Eretz. A third translation of Derech Eretz is prayer. I mentioned this last week as well. I don't know if I mentioned the fact that in Hebrew, the word prayer is tefillah. The word tefillah, if you add up the letters, every letter is a number, is 515. The word Derech Eretz, the two words Derech Eretz, also adds up to 515. So there's something connected, that Torah study is not enough. You also need prayer. You can't just study Torah. The difference between Torah study and prayer is sometimes described as, when you're studying Torah, it's reading God's love letter to you. It's God's wisdom that He's sharing with us. And He says, I love you. I'm sharing with you my most intimate secrets and giving you an opportunity. When you pray, that's your love letter to God. So there's a reciprocal relationship between Torah and prayer. Torah is where God shows His love for us, and prayer is where we show our love for Him. And if you have that combination, that'll desensitize you to negative things. And that's where you'll forget to sin. Another translation of Derech Eretz is secular knowledge. As we discussed last week in some measure of length, that Torah is embellished with secular knowledge. If the secular knowledge is done in the right amount, the right balance. Sometimes secular knowledge is just a means to earn a living. Sometimes secular knowledge, if a person studies astronomy or studies medicine. I've spoken once to a group of Israeli scientists who were skeptics, as Israelis tend to be, and others as well. And I was trying to prove to them God's existence, and they said, you don't have to prove it to us. We see it every day in the laboratory. When we work with DNA, there's no way that it could have happened without a God making it happen. They had problems with serving God, but the belief in God they had no problems with, because you see it from nature. A person who sees a beautiful sunrise, a beautiful sunset, when sees the birth of a child, and they see the intricacies of the human body, of every cell, you can't help it but to see God's grandeur, to see God's greatness. So secular knowledge could sometimes not just be a tool, sometimes it can be the way through which you can see God's greatness. So when you have Torah with that attitude towards secular knowledge, it desensitizes you to negativity, because you become so enamored with God's presence in your life. Another translation of Derech Eretz is your love of your fellow. A person who has Torah but doesn't care about others is someone who is going to ultimately end up sinning. You have to have a good relationship with God through Torah study, but you also have to have a good relationship with others. And an extension of that, another translation, is that it refers to teaching others. A rabbi who just studies Torah, and there are people who just sit and study Torah day and night, but they don't teach. They're missing something. And teaching is extremely important. It's not enough just to learn, it's important also to teach. Not only is it important to teach because teaching does what you're supposed to do in terms of dealing with others, it enhances your own learning as well, but that's a separate issue. And finally, the last translation of Derech Eretz in this context of this Mishnah is communal work. It's not referring just to work to earn a living, but it's communal work, people who work for the community. It could be a volunteer who works for the community. It could be a rabbi. Rabbis also have some value in this world. It could be anyone who's involved with the community. That's what makes the person complete. Torah study with communal work. It'll tie into the next week's Mishnah, where it talks about the government, how we have to be wary of government, because usually people who are involved in communal work have to have ties with the government, because they have all the power and all the influence. And that's why it says how careful you have to be with dealings with the government. But we'll deal with that next week, God willing. Now, the Mishnah continues, in all Torah, which is not combined with a worldly occupation or whatever, the Hebrew word here uses malacha. Malacha certainly here means work. Derech Eretz can mean many things. It could mean work, it could mean ethics, it could mean prayer, it could mean secular knowledge, it can mean teaching, it can mean communal work. But the word malacha means the work itself. Torah without work, the end will be that it will be neglected and becomes the cause of sin. Why will it be neglected? Very simply, there's no need for a profound interpretation of this. Torah without work means that you're not going to have the ability to support yourself. If you can't support yourself, you're not going to have the energy, you're not going to have the opportunity to study Torah, and you're not preoccupied with anything gainful, anything desirable. So the end will be that you won't be learning Torah, and that'll drag you into sin, because a vacuum will only invite negativity. And then he goes on, specifically, what kind of work are we talking about now? Work with a community. Now he makes that transition. And all who labor with a community should labor with them for the sake of heaven. When you're involved, when you're a communal worker, when you have influence over the community, there's a danger. The danger is you have power. And when you have power, power corrupts, as we all know. Even people who start off being very idealistic, and I would say that probably, maybe not most people, but certainly a significant minority of people who go into public service are idealistic when they go into it. And then something happens that they become corrupted. Because that's the nature of thing. When you have power, you think you own the world, and it's a drug that makes you want more of it. A little power, it's addictive. If it wouldn't be addictive, it wouldn't be so dangerous. But power is addictive. The more power you have, the more you want, the more you crave. The more money you have, the more money you want. There's an expression of the Talmud: a person who has $100 wants 200. If you have 200, you want 400. It keeps on growing geometrically. You want more and more, and that's money and power. Usually money and power go together, hand in hand. The only question is it power to get money or money to get power? And it ends up being both usually. So you have to be very careful, and that's one of the things that we see in Ethics of the Fathers. When the rabbi makes a teaching, that he throws in a caveat, that you have to be careful. Yes, working with the community is extremely important, and it takes you away from sin, but there's a danger that you could be doing things not for the right reasons. So whoever toils with the community should labor with them for the sake of heaven. You're doing it because this is what God wants you to do. This is the purpose for which you were created, to help the community. And then you have to recognize that the reason why you're successful, don't ascribe it to your own brilliance, to your own ability to do everything. Don't say, I'm God's greatest gift to the world, and therefore I'm successful. Attribute it to your ancestors. When your parents and your ancestors did some good things, the merits that they accrued, that they accumulated, accrues to you. You're given the benefit of it. So recognize that it's not just you doing it, and it's your power and your brilliance and your energy. It's the merit of your fathers that supports you, and their righteousness endures forever. Yes, our forefathers lived close to 4,000 years ago, but we're still benefiting from their merits. That's why we always invoke the memory of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, because their merits are still there with us today. And also not only them, but all the people in between that did such good things. But then, on the other hand, he throws in this caveat to the caveat here now is, so then I have to think of myself as being a nobody. I'm a nobody. I'm only successful because my parents, I didn't accomplish anything. No, as for you, God in such case says, I credit you with a rich reward as if you yourselves had actually accomplished it all. I will, even though you have to look at it as I'm the one who did this because I have all the power and all the energy from my ancestors. I've been bequeathed with such wealth, spiritual wealth and intellectual wealth and whatever other kind of wealth. So therefore, I'm a nobody. No, don't think you're a nobody. God will treat it as if you did it all, provided you recognize the gifts that you got from others. In other words, when do you get credit for something? When you give credit to others. When you not just your ancestors, by extension it can mean when you realize, you know why I'm successful in what I'm doing? Because the people that I work with are giving me the ability to succeed. So even though when you recognize that, God says, you know what, I will give you credit as if you did it all yourself. You get all the credit when you give all the credit to others. Others, not just your peers, but your especially your ancestors. And that's one of the questions that the Rebbe once addressed it many times. We believe the Mashiach is coming. We believe Mashiach is going to redeem us. How could it be that our ancestors, who were so much better than us, how come they didn't bring Mashiach and we are capable of doing that? How could we think of ourselves as being so capable when our ancestors didn't do it? Moses didn't do it. Rabbi HaNasi, Rabbi Gamliel didn't. All these great people that we revere and look up to, they didn't do it, and how could we claim that we're going to be able to do it? So there are two answers to that question, and we'll focus just on the first answer. The first answer is, we're like the child standing on the shoulders of a giant. Who could see farther? The child. Because he's taller than the giant. Because he's standing on the shoulders of the giant. We have the cumulative energy and inspiration and gifts from all of our forebears. So we are like the little child or the little dwarf standing on the shoulders of a giant, of giants. So we don't have to think of ourselves as we're going to be better than our ancestors. No, on the contrary, we're better only because we are our ancestors. We combine all of their good and all of their positive energy. We combine that in our own lives. We have their strength, we have their power. And when we accomplish something, when we succeed, it's them succeeding through us and a little bit of a token contribution that we are capable of. I tell this story all the time, which illustrates this point, that two beggars were once arguing about wealth. And one of them said, if I would have the wealth of Rothschild, I would be wealthier. It's not a small thing, it's a major thing. Any questions? Remember, Max isn't here. Yes, we need someone to take his place.
In Max's memory, I'll ask the
But
question.
he is here with us.
That was 10 million Jews.
Close. The rest of your house is very clean, but there's a big pile of dirt. The rest of everything is cleaned out now, and we just have a pile of dirt that we have to get rid of. And that's why it's coming out in a very ugly way. And it's there's an expression of a fish, where does it rot? At its head first? Well, where is the hatred coming out of mostly now? Out of universities.